And now we will move on to Representative Kennedy. Before we do that, I want to acknowledge that Representative McLaughlin is here. Sir, would you like to be included for the vote to move? We had 3 bills moved for consideration.
Yes.
Okay, so Representative, could he be please recorded in the affirmative on the votes? That'll be for the first 3 bills for consideration, which are House Bill 5075, 5164, and 5241, please. And now, if the committee will indulge me. Yep.
Does he want to be, does he want to vote in the affirmative for the other hold for further studies?
Yes, and to hold for further study, Representative McLaughlin, you vote in the affirmative for the remaining bills? Yes, he does. Thank you. Thank you, Clerk. Okay, and now we will move on to Representative Kennedy, Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy, to introduce his bill. That is House Bill 5210, an act relating to insurance. This is regarding Medicare supplement insurance policies. Representative Kennedy, you are with us. Speaker Pro Tem, go right ahead, please.
Thank you so much, Chairman and members of the committee. So this is a bill that I've sponsored the last couple of years. I first found out about this particular issue when I was at a meeting of the National Conference of State Legislatures. And specifically what this is at the current time here in the state of Rhode Island, anyone who is under 65 years of age who's dealing with either a disability or more particularly, if they're dealing with end-stage renal disease, which deals with your kidneys, you're not able to purchase a Medigap insurance product. Typically, these type of Medigap policies are very important to those individuals who haven't already reached the ability to have Medicare as a primary provider. Dialysis patients typically need to cover more than $7,000 a year in out-of-pocket copays and deductibles. So what they would like when they first approached me about sponsoring this legislation is the ability to have an equitable access to these Medigap type insurance policies in order to hopefully relieve some of the financial burden that they're already dealing with. Those who are dealing specifically with a disability and those who have end-stage renal disease, in many cases, those are issues in which financially individuals are facing a number of problems. I brought this to the attention of Patrick Tigue, and I believe he's going to be speaking a little bit later from the Office of the Health Insurance Commissioner. And he has been very supportive of this. In fact, he has already been working on a potential Substitute A bill, which will make it easier for his office at OHEC to be able to oversee these particular policies. At the present time, in the state of Rhode Island, I believe there's just under 1,700 people who specifically are dealing with end-stage renal disease. That number may be a little bit higher, but based on some information that I saw earlier, that seemed to be a number that they had brought forth for me to take a look at. And so with all that coming into play, again, these Medigap policies can help to hopefully assist some of these individuals who are already struggling with end-stage renal disease to be able to continue to move on with as normal a life as possible, recognizing that they're, in most cases, having to go for dialysis treatments 3 times a week.
Thank you, Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, at this time, we will move to our verbal testimony.
Patrick, online.
Hello, Patrick.
Yes, Chairman.
Yes, Patrick, this is Representative Casey, Chairman of the House Health and Human Services Committee. I have you testifying on Speaker Pro Tempore Kennedy's bill, House Bill 5210. If you would go ahead and give your testimony, you have our attention and the floor. Go right ahead.
Yes, thank you so much, Chairman Casey. Good evening to you and to other members of the committee, and thank you for the opportunity to testify tonight. My name is Patrick Tigue, and I am the Health Insurance Commissioner for the state of Rhode Island. My office's charge is to protect consumers of health insurance, encourage fair treatment of healthcare providers, improve the healthcare system as a whole, and guard health insurer solvency. I am testifying in support of House Bill 5210, which expands the availability of Medicare supplement plans to people under the age of 65 who are eligible for Medicare due to a disability or end-stage renal disease. It is my view that all Rhode Islanders eligible for Medicare should have these plans available to them to ensure appropriate access to care. Additionally, I would welcome the opportunity to suggest amended language for your consideration that would improve my office's ability to ensure that the premium rates charged for these plans are affordable for both current and new enrollees. I am grateful for your attention to this important issue and your continued leadership and hard work on all matters related to the health of Rhode Islanders. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Are there any questions from the committee for Patrick? Representative Potter, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll apologize ahead of time because this is a very personal issue for me. For those of you who don't know, my significant other is one of the aforementioned people who has end-stage renal disease and has been on dialysis for a number of years, waiting for a kidney transplant, and it was one of the main issues of what inspired me to run for office in the first place. But Patrick, I wonder if you can shed a little bit of light for the committee and for myself personally. I'd like to give you a brief background to Katie's experience, where all of 2019 and part of 2018, despite her qualifying for Medicare, we had to purchase a secondary insurance policy for her to stay active on the kidney transplant list. And at the beginning of 2020, she got a notice in the mail that her insurance policy was canceled because it was no longer acceptable to be collaborative with her Medicare policy. And despite all of my diligence and her diligence, I've never really been able to get a clear understanding of what particular regulations changed at that point. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit and elaborate on that if you might know. And I will say, thankfully, she, as of the new year, she was able to qualify for a new policy now, and she is back listed on the transplant list. But for all of last year, she was kicked off of that list. And it's a very glaring issue for us personally, because this is while she does dialysis herself at home, and Medicare is billed $55,000 per month. So the taxpayer is paying that while somebody is denied life-saving medical treatment. So it reflects, I would like the committee just to take a second and try to process the reflection that her experience really shows on how glaringly flawed our healthcare system is as a whole, and how much area of improvement that we urgently need to address. So, Patrick, I know that was a lot of information to process, but if you could potentially just elaborate on any information you might have to what changed for the year 2020 that would have disqualified her from a policy that she was qualified for previously.
Yeah. So, Representative, thank you for the question, and actually, more importantly, thank you for sharing her experience with me and with the committee tonight. I think that's really important, and it's a perfect example of, I think, why I'm here tonight testifying in favor of this legislation. And I'm so grateful to Representative Kennedy and the other sponsors for putting this bill forward. And I'm looking forward to collaborating with this committee and others to try to move it forward. To speak to the substantive issue that you were raising. So actually, I'm not aware of any policy or regulatory change that occurred in 2020 that would lead to the cancellation of a specific policy. Although I'd be happy to connect with you offline and get a little more detail, and we can chase that down for you, and I think pretty easily diagnose the specific cause that led to that termination of the policy as you're describing. I'd be happy to have me and my team do that for you, just so we have an understanding of that. But I think actually what that makes me want to emphasize to this committee even further is in this insurance market, these Medicare supplement plans, also known as Medigap plans commonly, there is currently no what's called guaranteed availability in this market. So it's possible for plans to be canceled and terminated without someone having other options to ensure that they can get coverage for people who are under age 65 with either a disability or end-stage renal disease. That's why we need to institute a guaranteed availability provision such as this bill puts forward. And I would note that in almost all of our other health insurance markets now, with the Affordable Care Act having been in place now for many years, plans that are sold to large employers and their employees, small employers and their employees, and even individuals on the individual market for people who are, again, not Medicare eligible, but are just buying individual insurance themselves, either through HealthSource Rhode Island or otherwise. In all of those markets, we have guaranteed availability under federal law that is enforced here in Rhode Island. I think that same type of requirement, that same type of guaranteed access to these plans that can help people defray the cost of life-saving treatment, I think is absolutely critical. And that's why I'm here tonight in favor of it. But Representative, if you like, I'm happy to connect with you offline, and we can do a little more work to quickly understand what actually happened in your family's case.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I just would have one more question, too, in the broad sense of it. You had mentioned a really, really important word, and I want to make sure that doesn't get overlooked, where you said people not only have access, but it's affordable. I think this is a great bill, and I thank Speaker Pro Tempore Kennedy for introducing it, obviously. What comes to mind as far as what particular parameters we can work on to make these eligible people not only have the availability to have access to it, but to ensure that it's going to be affordable to people? Because certainly people who are qualified as disabled are not necessarily people who are going to have a high income. And with the cost of healthcare rising, with premiums being what they are, with deductibles being what they are, just having the availability to access something doesn't exactly ensure that someone is going to be able to afford it, especially if they're collecting disability. So is there anything in particular that you might be able to suggest that the committee should consider along with this bill?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question, because that's, in my comments, that's actually exactly what I was alluding to in terms of, I do think we have an opportunity to consider including language that would enhance the regulatory authority of my office to be able to have additional authority to review the rates that are charged for these plans. I want to be clear, currently we already have the authority, as we do with all other health insurance rates in the state for commercial health insurance, to review and either modify, reject, or approve those actual rates. Obviously, that by itself is not a guarantee of affordability, although we work very hard to, only approve the minimum premium increases that are justified. I think in this particular market, the types of provisions that we could look at, the goal, right, is we want to make sure that everyone in this market are purchasing plans that are as affordable as possible. And that includes people over 65 who are currently purchasing plans and have access, and these new individuals who we would now have access, those that qualify under 65 on the basis of their disability or end-stage renal disease. And I think I think there's a number of options that can be accomplished to effectuate that. Different types of ideas that I think we could explore either through statute or regulation are things along the lines of setting setting different kinds of caps or ratios in terms of that premiums, for instance, that people under 65 can't differ from premiums for people over 65 only up to a certain degree. So I think there's a number of, there's other state models out there, and there's other types of measures we can do to constrain the cost. I mean, ultimately, obviously, insurers have to be able to price the premiums in a way that accounts for the cost, but we can't let that happen in a way that is on the backs of consumers being able to access plans. So I think there's a range of options there, and I'd love to work with you and Representative Kennedy and others on the committee to figure out what makes sense in terms of statutory language, but also what we can do with a regulatory solution to do that, and then review these plans very, very rigorously to ensure that the insurers are living up to their obligations to price plans affordably.
Thank you for that.
Of course.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you, Representative Potter, for your story, your personal story, as well as the questions that you raised. Are there any other questions from the committee for Patrick Tigue, please? Okay. If not, we will move on to our next. Thank you, Patrick. If not, we will move on to the next witness. Mr. Jamgoshan.
Yes.
Yes, this is Representative Casey from the House Health and Human Services Committee. You're here to testify on House Bill 5210 by Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy. You have the floor. You have our attention. Please go right ahead with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee members. Thank you, Representative Kennedy, for your leadership on this issue. But I just want to take a moment to also thank Representative Potter for sharing his personal story. I think it really kind of hammers home why this legislation is so needed, and why I'm here on behalf of dialysis patient citizens to express our strong support for HB 5210. I think that the question that was raised, why was that plan discontinued? Well, about 30 states across the country have what's called guaranteed issue. They require these Medicare supplement or these Medigap plans to be offered, but there's no such requirement available, in Rhode Island. And most likely, as Insurance Commissioner had mentioned right before me, that it's likely that plans can choose to discontinue at the end of a plan year, at the end of a term, and that may be, unfortunately, what happened in that case. That an insurance company, because they may have been one of only two or three plans in the market, they may have been getting all of the dialysis patients, and that may have been driving up costs versus having a guaranteed issue that requires all insurers to potentially participate. And so, the reason I'm here is obviously to echo our support, and for three reasons. Obviously, the financial stability that it provides for patients. I think Representative Potter emphasized the fact that even with Medicare, that only covers 80%, and so dialysis patients have to cover the other 20%, and there's no out-of-pocket limit for that 20%. And one of the reasons this financial stability is so important, our past president, he actually, early on, after he was diagnosed with kidney failure, was able to get, during a special enrollment period, a supplementary plan years and years and years ago. And he was on dialysis for 45 years, which is not common. Let me repeat that. He was on dialysis for 45 years. And he often credited the fact that he didn't have to worry about the financial side of things. He could just worry about his health and living on dialysis. I think, to Representative Potter's point, it's really difficult. Not every patient does as well on dialysis. And that's the second reason we're here is it truly is life-saving, this legislation, to potentially open up, as he mentioned, transplant is the optimal therapy. If you don't have kidney functions, then you're either on dialysis, or you get a transplant, or you die. Those are the three options. And in fact, one of the challenges he so well illustrated is the fact that there are 91,000 patients nationwide on the kidney transplant list. but only 53,745. So just about half that are active, listed as active on the waiting list. And whether it's because they don't have the secondary insurance or they don't have the extensive financial resources that a lot of these transplant centers require. Some of them may, still consider your for transplant without secondary insurance, but they want to see your bank balances. Some may require $20,000, $30,000, or even $50,000 in the bank to proceed to switch you back to active. And I think that's from a policy perspective for Rhode Islanders. I said, third, you talk about being good for Rhode Island. As a dialysis patient, you can get listed at multiple different, centers. And as I highlighted in my written testimony, there's one in Rhode Island. And so while, Representative Potter's significant other, unfortunately was moved to inactive, if they had come up, their place in line, as I referred to in my testimony, if their place in line had come up, then potentially a patient from Maine or Connecticut, which have similar protections in place as what's being suggested, then they could have shown the financial resources and been able to go ahead and get that potential transplant. And so I think, not to mention the fact that we talk about affordability and being good for the state, the last thing you want to is for patients to spend down their assets and end up enrolling in Medicaid, which often happens. At the same time, many patients make too much to even qualify for Medicaid. And so that's, one of the really difficult parts of affordable care for these patients. I mentioned being life-saving. The OPTN, or Organ Procurement Transplantation Network, listed 5,207 patients who died in 2019 while waiting for a transplant. This is pre-COVID. So literally the transplant would have saved their lives, and by making sure that Rhode Islanders have access to affordable supplementary insurance, you're making sure that these dialysis patients can not only continue to have the care that they need to stay alive, but that they also have access to life-saving transplant, and that that you're also protecting your citizens in your state as well. And for those reasons, on behalf of our members, on behalf of the 1,700 dialysis patients in the state, I'd like to thank you for your interest and efforts on this legislation. I'd like to thank Representative Kennedy as well as the Insurance Commissioner. I look forward to working with both of them on trying to continue to improve this legislation. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jamgoshan. Are there any questions for our witness from the committee? Okay. If not, I will just thank you, Mr. Jamgoshan. We're going to move on. And I would just like to let you know that regarding House Bill 5210, we had written testimony from 3 parties. Melanie Lendnall from the American Kidney Fund. She is in the affirmative on the bill. Harant Jamgoshan, who just spoke with us from the Dialysis Patient Citizens, he is in favor, obviously. And Patrick Tigue, who also testified verbally, also sent in written testimony. Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, just very quickly, I would like to invite Representative Potter, if he'd like to sign on to the bill. Next week when we're back, we'd love to have him on this bill. I recognize, as he does, the issues involved with this. I lost my mother to end-stage kidney disease. My mother had 3 sisters. All of them died from the same disease. And my sister, who's just a year younger than me, has already had a kidney transplant. So it's something that runs in my family. I know how personal it is. And as I said, I'd like to see us try to do something to try to address this issue this year. And in working with the Office of the Health Insurance Commissioner, he's already come up with a potential sub-A that will help to supplement his ability to oversee these type of plans and make sure that they are affordable for our marketplace.
Well, thank you, Speaker Pro Tem. I really appreciate that. I'd be very happy to do that. And I thank you again for your advocacy on the issue. And I look forward to working with you more in the future on these issues as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, I will close the hearing for House Bill 5210.